Right now, in a museum in Boston, there is an empty frame hanging exactly where a $100 million painting used to be. It has hung there, empty, for over 3 decades. Museum rules say it can never come down, not until the painting comes home. That painting is gone. So are 12 others. Together, they're worth $500 million, making this the largest unsolved property crime in American history. And the 2 men who took them? They walked in dressed as police officers, said 6 words that would become legend, and vanished. No one has ever been arrested. Not one piece of art has ever been found. This is the story of the Gardner Museum heist. To understand why this heist was even possible, you have to understand the woman behind the museum. Isabella Stewart Gardner was one of the wealthiest women in Gilded Age America, and she spent decades and a fortune buying up masterworks from crumbling European estates, Rembrandts, Vermeers, Titians, and shipping them home to Boston. In 1903, she opened her collection to the public inside a building modeled after a Venetian palace, courtyard, and all. But Isabella had one very specific, very unusual rule written into her will. Nothing in the museum could ever be moved, sold, or rearranged. If anyone changed the collection, the entire thing had to be crated up, shipped to Paris, auctioned off, and the proceeds handed to Harvard. That clause was meant to preserve her legacy forever. What it also did, decades later, was freeze the museum's security in time. By 1990, the Gardner's alarm systems were outdated. Its guards were underpaid art students working overnight shifts, and, according to people who studied it, Boston's criminal underworld had quietly clocked the museum as an easy target. It was, as one report later put it, a sitting duck. It's the early hours of March 18th, 1990. Technically, St. Patrick's Day weekend, and Boston is still loud with celebration, which is exactly the kind of night you'd pick if you wanted your crime to blend into the noise. At 1:24 a.m., 2 men dressed as Boston police officers ring the night bell at the museum's side entrance. They tell the guard on duty they're responding to a disturbance call. It's against protocol to let anyone in without verifying it through the front desk first. The guard breaks protocol anyway. Within moments, the officers have the guard against the wall. They tell him he looks familiar, that there's a warrant out for his arrest. It's a lie, but it's enough to get him to step away from the only alarm button in the room. Then they call his fellow guard, patrolling upstairs, down to the front desk too. Both men are handcuffed, and because the thieves apparently didn't want to risk explaining a gunshot in an empty museum, they're bound with duct tape instead and taken down to the basement, chained to a pipe and a workbench, far from any phone. Before they get to work, one of the men says the 6 words that would define this case forever. "Gentlemen, this is a robbery." For the next 81 minutes, the 2 men move through the museum's galleries with a mix of confidence and carelessness. They smash the glass protecting 2 Rembrandt paintings and cut the canvases directly out of their frames, including Rembrandt's only seascape. They take a Vermeer, one of only about 3 dozen his works known to exist anywhere in the world. They grab 5 delicate Degas sketches, a Manet, a bronze eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag, and an ancient Chinese beaker that, oddly, doesn't seem to fit the pattern of everything else they chose. And this is where the case gets strange. The museum's motion detectors recorded their movements throughout the night, so investigators know almost exactly where the thieves walked, and for how long in every room. But whole stretches of time are unaccounted for. In one gallery, they seem to have lingered for much longer than it would take to grab what was there. In another, valuable paintings were left completely untouched, while less impressive pieces were taken instead. At 2:45 a.m., 81 minutes after they arrived, the 2 men leave the same way they came in, carrying roughly $500 million in stolen art rolled up like posters. They make 2 trips to their car. No alarms, no police response, no witnesses on the street. The guards aren't found until morning, when the day shift arrives to a museum stripped of 13 of its most valuable pieces, and 2 men still duct taped to a workbench in the basement. The FBI opened an investigation almost immediately, and 30-plus years later, it is never officially closed. Along the way, it's pulled in an almost absurd cast of characters: mob associates, small-time art thieves, a Boston gangland enforcer, and even a group connected to the notorious Winter Hill Gang. One prime theory centers on a Boston area criminal named Miles Connor, an art thief with a history of museum burglaries, who was in prison at the time of the heist itself, but has long been suspected of masterminding the job from behind bars. Investigators have also connected the crime to figures tied to organized crime circles in Boston and Connecticut, men who died or went silent before ever facing charges. Over the decades, leads have stretched across the globe. Investigators have chased rumors that the art passed through Irish paramilitary networks, that it was quietly offered for sale in Philadelphia and Connecticut. Even that pieces were spotted briefly in Japan. None of it has ever produced a single recovered painting. The closest anyone's gotten was in the 2000s, when the FBI announced they believed they'd identified the thieves, but that both men had since died, and the trail for the art itself had gone cold somewhere in the Philadelphia criminal underworld in the years after the heist. The museum has offered a $10 million reward, the largest bounty any private institution has ever put up, for information leading to the art's return. The FBI has gone even further, offering immunity from prosecution to anyone connected to the theft, as long as they weren't one of the original thieves. And still, nothing. Walk through the Gardner Museum today, and you'll see something almost eerie. The empty frames are still there, exactly where the stolen paintings used to hang. Isabella Gardner's will means nothing in the collection, can be rearranged. So instead of taking them down, the museum leaves them exactly as they were the morning after the heist, waiting. It's a strange kind of memorial, not to the paintings, but to their absence. A permanent reminder that somewhere out there, a Vermeer worth more than most countries' art budgets is sitting in a box, a storage unit, a basement, or, if the darker theories are right, long since destroyed. And that mystery is exactly why the case refuses to fade. Every few years, a new tip surfaces. A dying mobster claims to know where the art went. A tip from Europe reignites the investigation. A documentary crew gets a few months of renewed public attention, and every time the trail runs cold again, because whoever has these paintings has a problem money can't easily solve. They're too famous to sell. No legitimate auction house, no private collector who wants to stay out of prison would touch them, which means the art is either locked away by someone who simply wants to possess it in secret, or it's gone completely. 35 years later, the Gardner heist remains exactly what it was in the first 81 minutes. One of the boldest, strangest, and most successful crimes in American history. 2 men in fake uniforms walked into a palace built by a woman who wanted her collection frozen in time forever. And, in the most unintended way possible, that's exactly what happened. The frames are still empty. The reward is still unclaimed. And somewhere, 13 masterpieces are still missing. If you ever find out where they are, the museum would very much like to know.